Indian police are expected to charge 6 men accused of gang raping a university student for nearly an hour on a moving bus last month. The 23-year-old woman later died of her injuries. The men will be charged with murder, rape, and kidnapping. The case has ignited a firestorm in India, where thousands of women have protested daily against the treatment of women in their country since that case. The case is expected to be expedited through India's justice system. To talk more about this, we're now joined by Dr. Gareth Price, a senior research fellow at the Asia program at Chatham House. Good morning, Gareth. Thank you for being with us.
Hello.
This case has garnered not only national attention in India, but also international attention for the severity and the brutality of the crime. As I mentioned, the 23-year-old woman who has not been named has died of her injuries. The protests that we've been seeing in India since this case broke have largely centered around women who are protesting against the treatment of females in India. Can you give us an idea, Gareth, about the status women have in India at this time?
I think it's problematic. I mean, India is obviously undergoing a lot of economic change and so forth, but social attitudes towards women are, women are often seen as second-class citizens, and I think you can see that from the figures relating to female infanticide. That in some areas you've got dramatic shortages of women compared to men, which is because female girls are aborted before being born.
Well, this case has garnered so much attention. The government is promising sort of a speedy trial, and that's rare for India. It's notorious for its sluggish court system. How do you think that this case might change, perhaps, the tone that sexual assault cases in general are looked at in India?
Well, in the past, the figures for the number of women who say they've been raped are rising dramatically, and a lot of that probably shows an increased willingness to report rapes and assaults and so forth. And so in that case, the case seems likely to keep that trend, but at the same time, you've got a lot of, it's been highlighted in the protests regarding this case. There's a lot of, senior politicians and so forth who also have cases of sexual assault or rape reported against them, and in those cases are certainly not being expedited. So, I think certainly there's, in part, we've seen with quite a lot of things, with corruption allegations, that there have been protests breaking out, because the government's seen as being rather weak at the moment, that citizens are taking action themselves, and this is the same in response to the awful rape last month. I think the danger, though, is that what will happen is that, if you like, the symptoms will be treated. So you already saw talk of, because this rape occurred on a bus with tinted windows, that laws would be passed to make sure the buses couldn't have tinted windows, which is not really addressing the root cause of the problem.
Well, you mentioned leaders and people in high-profile positions who are also being accused of rape, and I want to bring out a specific example of the leader of the ruling Congress Party, Bikram Singh Brahma, has also been accused of raping a woman. And he was actually subjected to some angry women who surrounded him, ripped off his shirt, slapped him across the face, things like that. Does India have a history of powerful people getting or being accused of assaults like this without being prosecuted? Is that a big problem in India?
Well, I think, there are different things. Yeah, those who are politically influential, and not just at sort of national level, also at local levels. Police are sometimes unwilling to press charges. So that's on the one hand. At the same time, it's also true that you do have a tendency in India and elsewhere to have sort of politically motivated charges put against people. But for sure, the tendency to go slow, and again, partly it relates to not just police being unwilling to charge influential figures, but also a sense that if a woman's been raped, in some cases she's brought it on herself. And so there's a sort of stigma attached, which also encourages the police to go slow on investigations.
Well, usually in societies where topics such as equality between the sexes or races or things like that are trying to gain momentum in that country, it's a little bit odd when a court case is really driving that force. How do you think, first of all, this case will go in India? The justices and the lawyers in India are cautioning against a mob mentality for these 6 men who are going to be charged today. From what we've seen since this case erupted in mid-December, do these men have any chance at getting a fair trial, do you think?
I suppose the question is less whether they'll get a fair trial. I mean, I think that would probably be, the trial itself would probably be okay. I think the question of sentencing at the moment is, the mob mentality surrounding this, as you put it, could have an effect. I think there's a sort of a broader question. I mean, you have, cities like Delhi have big, large migrant populations, people that come in from the countryside with, if you like, more, how to put it, well, if you like, more backward social attitudes towards women. At the same time, in Delhi, you have socially empowered women, but at the same time, because of the gender disparity, there are many more men than women in Delhi. So you have very sort of deep-seated social tensions going on, and this case, if you like, is symptomatic of that, and the danger is that everything becomes focused on this one case rather than the broader question.
Right, that is a good point, Gareth, and one I want to kind of explore further with you. When you're trying to gain equality for women, let's say in India, and you're really using this case as momentum for that, how's that going to affect the case, or conversely, how will that affect this movement to get more equality if we're trying to base it on the innocence or guilt of these 6 men? How is that going to affect the broader movement by these women who are trying to gain equality in their country?
I mean, the kind of extreme violence associated with this case, I think what it potentially could do is take away, once and for all, the idea that these are people that, to use the phrase, brought it on themselves. Clearly this girl in no way brought anything on herself, and it was a brutal attack, as most rapes are. If it can change that kind of social attitude, that this isn't something that, the woman was partly at fault, which so self-evidently she wasn't in this case, that would maybe go some way to change attitudes. I mean, the other point as well is, if this case can be expedited, other cases can be expedited. And I think in the last couple of days, the court in Bihar said that there were 500 outstanding rape cases, and these are going to be fast-tracked. So suddenly rape becomes something where the courts do take action rather than simply leaving the cases open for years or whatever. Then, those would be important victories, if you like, for women's rights.
Gareth, why do you think that this case has ignited such a firestorm in India? I mean, clearly it's a brutal attack, and rape is a brutal crime. But why do you think, in particular, the story of this 23-year-old university woman has hit such a nerve with so many of the women in India?
I think that's a very fair question, because whenever one's in India looking at the papers, they're full of stories of rape and assault, primarily happening in villages. And I think there's a sort of extent to which that's expected in villages, and that's not actually a big story. I think the fact that this happened in an affluent part of Delhi, it's touched on, if you like, the urban middle class. And so it's got more press attention, more television attention, more newspaper attention, and then that by itself has gathered momentum. But I think it's a very fair question, because this is far from the first brutal rape in India, and yet I think it's largely that, simply that it happened in Delhi, that there's a lot of urban women in India thinking this could have been any of us going home from a cinema after a night out.
Sure. Well, in India's neighboring countries, such as Pakistan or Afghanistan, it's very common to hear of injustices against women and the status that women have in those societies. Compare India to, say, Afghanistan in terms of equality for women. Where does India stand?
I think it would largely vary by, if you like, class. That in rural India, women are certainly treated as second-class citizens. That's less the case in urban India, and there are obviously many successful Indian women. Having said that, lots of women living in Delhi do say that they're subject to wolf whistles or lewd comments and so forth on a daily basis almost. So there's clearly sort of a problem faced by all women, but the ability of women to get ahead in society is much greater amongst the sort of urban middle class than it is amongst in sort of rural village India.
All right. Well, this case is unfolding. The first part is happening today. The 6 men who are accused of raping and eventually murdering 23-year-olds are expected to be charged formally in court today. We've been joined today by Dr. Gareth Price, a senior research fellow at the Asia program at Chatham House, to discuss this. Dr. Price, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.